Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Nintendo Everything Refresh, the weekly show where we keep you all up to date on everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo. I'm your host Nick Serpa, joined today by a new voice here on the podcast. We have Dawn joining us for the first time. Everyone say hello. Welcome, Dawn.
Hey, thank you, good to be here.
So Dawn, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do over at Nintendo Everything?
I mostly cover the news Mondays to Fridays in the morning when everybody else is asleep. So chances are when you wake up, you see an article on the site, it's probably from me. And I've done a few guides as well in the past and just a couple of reviews. So yeah, I'm been about for a while.
Yeah, no, it's important when at least for all of our American listeners, you know, by the time we wake up, you've already done a full day of reporting over across the pond. So we're grateful for your service.
Thank you.
So yeah, so it's really nice to have a fresh voice on. And yeah, for our listeners, if you've been listening over on Spotify, wanted to apologize. We had some technical issues with the last one. For some reason, our last episode didn't go out until recently, so sorry about that. But yeah, we, after having all recovered from the amazing Nintendo Direct a couple weeks ago, it has been nice to kind of slow down a little bit, but we have still gotten a good amount of news. So there's actually a fair amount to talk about this week. This first topic, I don't really know what my opinion on this is. We've talked about it a little bit on previous episodes of the podcast. But there is a new Pokemon game coming out that's a little bit non-traditional. It's called Pokémon Sleep. And we have known about this for, I feel like a pretty good amount of time, but all we've really known is that it is a Pokemon game that you install on your phone and you put your phone next to you on your bed while you sleep. And this thing it tracks your sleep stats and then turns it into a Pokemon game. It was weird. We didn't really know too much about it. And then I want to say it was a couple months ago, there was a Pokemon Presents presentation where they talked about this game. And they revealed that there's a physical accessory that you can buy. It's a little Pokeball that you put on your bed, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting, but it's really strange. So this has been a big question in the back of my mind for a while. Like, what is this and why? And this past week we have finally got a little bit more information about this game. We know it is now officially coming sometime this month. We don't know exactly when. If you have an Android phone, you can go pre-register, which means it should download automatically once it does come out. But yeah, so there was a round of previews that came out this week, and Dawn, you might get a kick out of this. The Pokemon Company actually flew press out to a hotel and had them spend the night so they could test out this game.
That must be some people's dream job, being paid to sleep.
I mean, honestly, how often does that happen? Yeah, okay, so the basics of this game, at least as far as I understand it. So the longer you sleep and the deeper sleep you get affects, so you have this little Snorlax and you're trying to increase his drowsy power because apparently the higher Snorlax's drowsy power, he will attract more Pokemon. And then when you wake up in the morning, you can give little snacks to your Pokemon and you can activate some skills to help level them up and stuff. So all pretty basic, but it's all based around your sleep and your sleep style. Yeah, I don't know. Dawn, what do you make of this?
I honestly don't know what to make of it. I mean, I can only imagine how some people who are actually going to get this are going to take it. It's going to be because, they wake up first thing in the morning, do I get up and check my phone and see what my Pokemon are doing, or should I go back to sleep and try and get some more Pokemon?
Ah, yes, that is always the key existential crisis.
I
Can
mean,
I
I can
actually?
see here that it says in the preview that players get 100 points when they sleep for 8.5 hours, and I'm just thinking to myself, well, I get about 5 hours sleep a night, so there's no way I'm going to get 100 points for anything.
Well, see, Don, you're the target audience. Clearly, that the game is trying to tell you something about your sleep habits. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this on the show before. We all know it's weird. It's not news. I guess I just don't really understand that. I mean, I guess it's kind of cool, maybe if like you have a kid or something and you're trying to instill good habits on them. I could see like some level of appeal. But the crazy thing to me with this, and I don't think it's in our story on the site, but there's going to be a paid, I guess you could call it like a battle pass or whatever. Obviously there's no combat in Pokemon Sleep, but I want to say it's like $50 a year, and it's like an accelerated battle pass for this game that you play while you're asleep. It's wild.
That's quite expensive when you consider how much. I mean, I suppose all of the Pokemon mobile games have some quite expensive microtransactions, but I don't think that many of them have battle passes, do they? I mean, I do play a lot of Pokemon, but I don't really play the mobile games very much, so I'm not sure what they've got. I don't think any of them have stuff like that in them.
Yeah, battle pass might be the wrong word, but I think that at least lets people understand like the basic concept of it. I don't know exactly what it does. My guess is it probably just makes it easier to progress and collect more Pokemon and things like that. But
the insomniacs out there.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I know this is not coming to Switch. It's a mobile phone release, but I wanted to bring it up just because it's just an interesting thing that is happening.
Well, not yet anyway. I suppose it could come to Switch. I mean, Unite is cross-play, isn't it? And there's another one, I can't remember what it is.
That's
Pokemon Quest,
true.
that was it. Quest came to Switch as well, didn't it, after coming to phone? The one with the weird block cube Pokemon.
Yeah, I do vaguely remember that. Yeah, who knows? Maybe there will be a Switch port and they'll like find some weird way to use the IR sensor on the Joy-Con. Like they'll use it to like monitor like your your body heat while you're asleep or something crazy like that. Honestly, would not surprise me.
I have to be honest, I leave my Switch in sleep mode more often than not. I very rarely actually turn it off, so if I got points for leaving my Switch in sleep mode, I'd be set.
There you go. It sounds like your Switch gets more sleep than you do, Don. That might not be a good thing. The Pokemon Sleep app might be for you. So yeah,
Well,
so that's the
I have the
basics.
Plus pre-ordered.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're curious about this, it's going to be a free app and it's coming out at some point in the future. I honestly don't really have any interest in it, but it's just kind of fun to talk about. The Pokemon Company is, say what you will about them, but they know how to experiment from time to time.
They're definitely branching out.
Yes, yes. It's the whole what do they call it? The blue ocean strategy, where it's just let's go after a new market of people, I guess. And I don't know. But yeah, so that was just kind of an interesting thing that happened this week. But much more exciting, at least if you're a fan of Mario Kart, is we finally got a release date for Wave 5 of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's next DLC. And we knew a little bit about this because they talked about it in the recent Nintendo Direct. But now we have a look at all of the courses coming to this DLC. And I know not everyone is excited about the DLC, but darn it, this is my podcast and I'm excited about it. Yeah, I don't know about you, Don, but I cannot get enough of this like DLC. Like I cannot believe the amount of courses they have added to this game, and like it is just incredible. Like this is far and away the definitive Mario Kart game at this point, and I like don't want them to stop adding courses. Honestly,
They have really gone above and beyond with this one, haven't they? I mean, I remember, what was it, about a year ago, everybody was clamoring for Mario Kart 9 and just hoping that was going to come, and then they announced this whole booster course pass, and I can remember there was a huge upcry about it, but time's gone on. I think quite a lot of people have been quite happy with what's come out of it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so some of the new courses that they showed off, we already knew about one of them called Squeaky Clean Sprint, which is a totally new course that's in a very large bathroom. Maybe it takes place in the Pikmin universe. I don't know. But yeah, all the other courses are returning. We've got a couple from Mario Kart Tour, which, like, to me are basically new courses because I haven't really kept up with that game. They have a course in Athens this time around, which will be really interesting, and one in LA, which I think that one will actually be pretty cool because I've gone to LA a few times, and so I'm hoping I'll actually be able to recognize some landmarks for that one. And Vancouver, can't forget about our friends up in Canada. I don't know really. I've never been to Vancouver, but they do a good job, I think, for the most part, from what I've heard. Like obviously these are not like ever realistic interpretations of these cities, but you know they try and capture like the spirit of them for the most part.
You'll know where it is when you see it. Landmarks,
yes. Yeah, it's yeah, it was really funny. After this DLC was announced, I saw someone on Reddit. They had edited together a version of the Vancouver track with like a bunch of like actual things and like actual footage of Vancouver, like blizzards pounding and just like fast food chains and stuff. I was like, this is amazing.
Costa on every street.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I think looking at this list of courses, the one I am most excited for, an all-time classic, let's be honest, is Daisy Cruiser from Mario Kart Double Dash.
That was it still is my personal favorite Mario Kart, and yeah.
Yeah, that game was just so unique in so many ways, and yeah, there were some amazing tracks in that game, and we have quite a few already in the Switch version. But I mean, gosh, this is gonna be like seeing some of these courses and like these old GBA ones from Mario Kart Super Circuit, just totally just redone and you know still maintaining their pretty basic style overall, but just incredible, just beautiful interpretations of these just very old games. Just makes me very happy. So
I still hope they're gonna at some point gonna add the co-op multiplayer that Double Dash had, because I've got really fond memories of playing that with friends. And when they took that out of the Wii version, I was, well, to be honest, I was pretty devastated because I was really looking forward to playing it again, and it never happened. And with this one, they've done so much with it. I'm really hoping they're just going to bring that back at the end as a surprise, maybe.
Hey, fingers crossed. Yeah, for my part, I know like the battle mode is not the most popular part of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but they really redid it for the Switch port, and I think it's actually pretty good compared to the Wii U version. And it would be nice to get like, you know, see some of these environments like maybe adapted to that mode, because there's still not like a ton of content for battle mode, but yeah, that's all pretty pie in the sky. I think this is probably going to be all we're going to get. Although, hey, who knows? You know, with Smash Bros, they finished the first Fighter Pass and then they announced the second one, so you never know.
That game.
You never know. So yeah, the fifth wave is coming out on July 12th, so it may be out by the time you're listening to this. And yeah, I think that whole expansion has really, at least for me, I've been getting my money's worth from it. All right, now we do have some more news to talk about in terms of like actual like game announcements and all that. But before we get into that, I just want to point out some other just kind of interesting behind the scenes stories from this week. Now, if you are deep into the kind of history of how games are made and you're really interested in Nintendo kind of like secrets and you know development stories and things like that, you've probably been at least aware of Masahiro Sakurai's YouTube channel, which has just been an amazing source for that kind of content since he launched it last year. He has been basically going through his entire career of game development and talking about the games that he made and his philosophies behind them and stories from development and just giving like general game development advice. It's all very cool, at least to me. And he finally has made a video talking about the development of Kid Icarus Uprising, which is one of my favorite 3DS games. It was one of the games that got me to buy the system, and it's just one of those games I feel like even today just holds up incredibly well. And yeah, if you guys haven't checked out this video, I would really recommend a watch if you're interested in that part of Nintendo's history. So the thing that was interesting to me about this was he didn't actually set out to make a Kid Icarus game at first. He started off wanting to make a third-person shooter for the system, and it just so happened that after he had, kind of figured out what he wanted the mechanics to be, he was kind of tasked by Nintendo, saying, pick basically an IP from Super Smash Brothers, and make theme the game around that. And so he just chose Kid Icarus because he was like, well, it's a good fit for this type of game, and he hasn't had a game in a while, and Nintendo just approved it. And I don't know, I think it's crazy that he didn't set out to make a Kid Icarus game at first, and that just kind of came later on.
Yeah, quite a lot of some of these things seem to come around by chance, don't they? Because I remember him making a video about the original Super Smash Brothers and how that came to be, and that originally wasn't with Nintendo characters, was it? That was with...
Right.
I think he showed off some concept footage, and it was just a bunch of, random characters who people weren't going to know. And the Nintendo characters got added later, and I thought that was quite interesting. And a lot of it seems to come about by chance rather than by design, which might be why it sticks out so much in history, I suppose.
Yeah, it does seem to be
accidents.
A recurring theme, at least with the games that he's been involved with. But yeah, and so another just kind of interesting thing about it, he of course mentioned that he would love to see the game be remastered on a bigger screen with smoother graphics, he said.
No, he's not alone in that.
No, he is definitely not alone in that. But he kind of quelled those hopes too, because he said that without a team around to work on it, crafting a follow-up seems difficult. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that's true. It's not the news I want to hear, but yeah.
To be fair, they said that about Skyward Sword for years and years, didn't they? Oh, it's not going to be possible. It's not coming. And lo and behold, I think it was year before last, 2021, we got Skyward Sword HD. So you never know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point about Skyward Sword. I kind of along a similar lines with the controls. I think if they ever did do a remaster, it would be a chance for them to add in dual stick controls, which funnily enough also kind of came up in this video because Sakurai was talking about how when the game came out, it was around the time that the Circle Pad Pro was coming out. And they actually really wanted to get it working so that you could have dual analog controls on the 3DS. But the reason it wasn't possible, he says, is because Kid Icarus Uprising was apparently already pushing the 3DS to its limits. It would have required like 5% more power to add a second analog stick, and they just couldn't do it. Which I think is definitely a testament to how advanced that game was in terms of pushing that hardware at the time. But it's cool to know that they did at least like experiment with it and that they wanted to try and get it working. But I don't know. I'm fascinated by stuff like that. Like that's a really just rare glimpse into 3DS game development that we just don't really ever get nowadays.
Yes, saying that, I actually wonder if they might have been able to do something with the new 3DS, because that was capable of quite a bit more, I think, and it also had the teeny tiny, really hard to use analog nub as well, which kind of acted like, a dual analog in some games. I mean, it was implemented fairly well in Monster Hunter Generations, but it was pretty awkward.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have not played that game on a new 3DS, so I can't tell you. I think if I had to guess, my assumption would be that it just kind of behaves like how the Circle Pad Pro does, where it just kind of lets you swap the controls. But maybe not. I'll have to boot that up and give it a try. Now I'm curious.
It would be interesting. I know the new 3DS wasn't really implemented that much, was it? I think it only got two exclusive games in the end. I mean, it had Xenoblade 3D, which I think it had a version of Fire Emblem Warriors as well. But other than that, I can't think of
Yeah.
too many games which were new 3DS only.
Yeah, there were a couple. I think those were the big ones from Nintendo. A couple games that they put out, they did like perform better on the new system. Like I feel like I remember Smash for 3DS ran slightly better on the new 3DS than it did on the base 3DS. Things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm still, even though I'm sure he was trying to quell everyone's hopes, I'm still going to keep my fingers crossed for a Kid Icarus Uprising remaster, and maybe one of these days it will come true, and I will be very
Yeah,
happy.
I wouldn't rule it out.
You know. Hey, speaking of old games coming back, I think this has fell under off of a lot of people's radar. I was very excited when it was announced, but we just had earlier this summer, Capcom re-released the DS cult classic kind of point and click puzzle detective game, a Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, which was the whole premise of this game back when it released on the DS was you use the touchscreen to possess different objects, and you're trying to kind of solve these environmental puzzles as this spirit to progress the story and solve your own, solve the mystery of your own murder. It was a really unique game at the time, and it has not really been super playable. There has been an iOS port that's been available for a while, but this is really the first time it's gotten re-released on consoles since then. And it seems like it's been landing well with people. I haven't played the remaster yet, but some interviews have been coming out about this game, and apparently one of the reasons they remastered it was because apparently fan demand was just really high. I just thought this was fascinating. So Yuki Kaji, who was a voice actor for the Phoenix Wright anime, which of course Capcom would be involved with, he told the game director that at one point the iOS version wasn't working really well, and that was kind of the start of how they decided to remaster the game, which is crazy. Dawn, have you ever played Ghost Trick?
No, I haven't. He's on my to-do list though. Well, I have a very long to-do list when it comes to games I actually want to play, but I do plan on picking this one up because it does look pretty interesting. And I've had a run of detective games on the Switch recently with Process of Elimination back in March, I think it was, and we just had Masters Detective Archives as well. So it just keeps going with these detective games, but this one looks quite interesting and quite unique, so I do plan on picking it up eventually.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. It is more of I don't want to call it a puzzle platformer, but it is more of a puzzle game, I would say. But yeah, it's nice to hear. I think a lot of times, people who want games to be brought back or whatever, people will go on Twitter and complain about it and try and get the company's attention, but sometimes it's hard to tell, like, whether that stuff is actually reaching people, whether companies are actually paying attention. And so it's nice to hear that, like, in this case, at least Capcom is trying to pay attention to what fans are asking for. Like,
Capcom have done quite a lot recently, actually, haven't they? I mean, just looking through their franchises, they've got Ace Attorney, they're bringing the Apollo trilogy back. They've got Dragon's Dogma, which is getting a sequel. I know Ghosts and Goblins got a remaster. Mega Man, pretty much all of these games on the Switch at this point, almost, except for some of the more obscure ones. And Monster Hunter, obviously, and Resident Evil, they're still going strong, so...
Oh, yeah.
I can just hear the Dino Crisis fans crying out in outrage.
Like, don't forget about us! Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know, it's cool to me that, like, they asked the fans, like, what they wanted a remake of, and this game came really high up, and then they made it. And I think we should have more of that. And hopefully people actually buy it so that Capcom can see that, like, it wasn't all just noise. I'll be interested to like hear like how this one does, because it is kind of a hard game, I feel like, to market to like a broad audience.
There's a lot more competition now than there used to be, isn't there, to get these things to stand
Yes.
out? But
Yeah,
it is
definitely.
quite reasonably priced actually for a remaster on. Well, for I think it's digital only, but I think you can get a physical by Asia or somewhere. But it is pretty reasonably priced as well, so hopefully it'll find a small market to generate some more interest.
Yeah, yeah. Fingers crossed. Because I always think these smaller and more experimental games, I always want to see them do well, because I think we need more of that out there. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. And one more headline I want to get to before we start talking about game announcements. Just really quickly. If you didn't see the Super Mario Brothers movie while it was in theaters, apparently it is coming to streaming services in August. It is launching on Peacock, which is NBC Universal's streaming service. Did you ever catch that movie, Don, when it was in theaters?
Um, Not when it was at theatres, but I have seen it. I've got it off of Amazon. It's pretty good, I thought. Pretty well paced. I mean, some of the song choices are a bit cringeworthy, to be honest, but
Yeah.
it was like something out of a really bad early 90s movie at times, but I think that was part of the charm, and all the little references as well. That was one thing I loved about the Sonic films as well. All the tiny references they just packed in for fans of the series to just pick up.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely had a lot of nostalgia and love poured into it, I feel like. Yeah, no, but yeah, those licensed songs that I feel like we've heard in like every animated movie ever in the last decade. I was like, I rolled my eyes when those came up. I was like, oh, come on, we can be better than this, guys.
I'm glad it wasn't just me, because that
No,
was
it
my
was,
reaction literally every time a song started playing. It's like, oh my god, not this again. Please.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely not just you. But yeah, no, yeah, I saw it. I don't really have much of a desire to see it again, but I guess if I do, it is going to be on streaming services. So there you go. If you haven't seen it, it's probably a good way to check it out and not risk, spending a lot of money on movie tickets for your whole family. So there you go. All right, well, let's get into our next segment, talking about some of the game announcements from the past week or so. A couple things came out from Anime Expo. We're not going to talk about everything from that, but at least one or two games. I've kind of structured this, Don. If you look at the rundown, you might notice we're going from like the calmest game announcements all the way up to the most chaotic ones towards the end. So buckle up, folks. This is going to be quite the jarring shift here between games. Okay, so this first one that was announced recently, I'm sure at this point a lot of folks are aware, at least, of Power Wash Simulator, which was just kind of a surprise hit, I think, for a lot of folks. That was a game where you just like clean things with a power washer, and apparently it's really cathartic and satisfying for certain types of brains. Well, it is kicked off a genre apparently, because now there's a game coming out called Fresh Start, and they're calling it a relaxing deep clean adventure. Except this time, instead of power washing, you have this weird. I guess it looks like a vacuum kind of, and you're going around the world like outside, and you're trying to restore nature to its fresh and colorful state, they say. So you're doing things like vacuuming up piles of junk and recycling things and bringing dead plants to life.
Channeling our inner Super Mario Sunshine.
That's true. That's really what this is. This is the long-awaited spiritual sequel to Super Mario Sunshine. Yeah, I don't know. Look, I have not played Power Wash Simulator. I can kind of understand the appeal. I don't know if it needs to be a whole genre. I don't know if I'm convinced about that yet. But I do kind of like the environmental aspect. It's a good message at least.
We have actually got one coming out on Switch this week, actually, No Place Like Home, which I think is a very similar thing by the looks of it. It's another sort of cozy life sim cleaning simulator thing.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a cleaning game.
Actually, I think it's been on Switch for a while. It's coming out physically this week, but I think it's been out for a while. But
Oh,
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
they seem to be slowly making the jump, because I think this one's been on Steam for a while as well.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, you know what? No shade against it. I'm sure these games can be very calming and relaxing, but yeah, I just there's so much other stuff to play. I don't see myself getting into this one, but I thought it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting kind of spin on that other very popular game. So I wanted to at least mention it.
Really good for down. Just want to switch off for a little while and just do something that doesn't require much input.
Yeah, protect some endangered wildlife and be a good person in a video game. There you go. Now, this next one is much more my jam. This is kind of a throwback to a very specific type of game that I don't know if you're familiar with, Don. So this game is called, it needs a better title, I'll be the first to admit. It's called Marble It Up. Marble It Up Ultra. It's actually a sequel to another type of marble-focused game that came out, which, yes, apparently that is a genre now. Marble platforming, they call it. I don't know if you've ever played, it's a classic PC game called Marble Mania. And if you've never played one of these games, in a way, they kind of resemble Super Monkey Ball is the best way I could compare it. But they've kind of got their own vibe to them. They're a little different, but that's the basic concept. If you've played a monkey ball game, you'll definitely be able to jump into something like this and have a good time. They're just kind of physics-based platformers, and they're simple. But yeah, I have a little bit of nostalgia for it because I used to play Marble Mania way back in the day, and this is kind of a spiritual sequel to that.
I have played a Monkey Ball game, but I think it was the original on the GameCube years and years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was on the GameCube. It might have been on the Dreamcast. I honestly don't remember, but it was a very long time ago.
Yeah, this is kind of in the same vein of that. Do you have any interest in something like this, or you might just rather go play Monkey Ball? I get the sense.
I probably would pick up Monkey Ball just because I recognize the characters.
Yeah, no, totally fair. But yeah, no, it's cool. This comes from a pretty small team, and so I'm glad that their first game did well enough to get a sequel. So yeah, it's kind of a cool indie I wanted to highlight. That one is coming out August 17th for $30 here in the US. All right, let's ramp things up a little bit. We're gonna get into slightly more chaotic, I guess, releases. This one is chaotic, at the very least, for having what is quite possibly the longest name in all of video games. I think should I read the full game title out loud? I think I should.
Yes, yes, it is brilliant. I love it.
Okay, all right. So the name of this game is Mon Yu. Defeat monsters and gain strong weapons and armor. You may be defeated, but don't give up. Become stronger. I believe there will be a day when the heroes defeat the Devil King. That's the name of this game.
It's the greatest name I have ever heard. It's brilliant. I love it. It's great.
It's multiple sentences with punctuation. I don't understand. Okay, Don, if I remember you correctly, you are going to try and review this game. So maybe, could you tell me a little bit about this one?
From what it looks like, I believe it's a first-person dungeon crawler, so something like, well, yeah, an Experience title. Experience do things like Demon Gaze and Undernaut's Labyrinth of Yummy. Both of those I absolutely loved. I mean, if you've played or heard of Etrian Odyssey, which is a little bit more famous, I suppose, for that genre, it's similar to that. But this
Gotcha.
one, in a lot of things, it just seems to ramp the anime in it up to 11. As if the title wasn't any indication.
Yeah, it seems like a more over the top take on what you're describing, like Etrian Odyssey and all that.
Yeah, hopefully not as difficult as those games. Etrian Odyssey games can be absolutely brutal at times.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I haven't really played many games in this genre. I've always been curious about it because I feel like I would enjoy it in theory, but I guess I just haven't really found one that's really grabbed me. Um, yeah, I think this one they're really banking on just the really bizarre name to draw people in, which it definitely did. But yeah, I'm not so sure like what other than that like what the really unique aspects of it are. To me, it looks like a pretty standard first person dungeon crawler, but just like you said, just really leaning hard into the anime sensibilities and tropes and all that.
I think it's probably going to try and sell itself on personality more than on differing gameplay, which is fine with
Probably,
me.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, this game has been announced for a little while, and it is we've known it's coming, but we finally got a release date for it. We know it is now coming September 21st, 2023. So yeah, this has been a pretty good year for fans of dungeon crawlers between the Etrian Odyssey trilogy and now this. There's been some smaller titles scattered around as well too. So yeah, it's been a pretty good year for fans of that, I would say. All right, this next one we had announced at Anime Expo recently, and it's not a brand that I'm super familiar with. But it's called Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash, and this is a 2v2. They're calling it an action fighting game. It's kind of like it is a fighter game, but it's not like a side head-on fighting game. It's more like, I guess, could you call it an arena fighter? Is that like the right
um,
term
yeah, I
for it?
suppose you could. I mean, there's quite a lot of anime that have sort of adopted this style. I mean, the Naruto games have the
Right.
Ultimate Ninja Storm, and then there's My Hero Academia, which had a couple of games in this style as well. I think Demon Slayer got something vaguely similar as well. They seem to be doing quite a lot of anime games in that sort of vein, and this one seems to, well, 2v2, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's typical of the genre. Normally it's sort of 1v1, or My Hero Academia, I think, might have done 3v3, I'm not sure, but it does seem to sort of follow in that kind of pattern. And I know Jujutsu Kaisen's got a second season coming out, or has come out, and it seems to be getting pretty popular in Japan, so that's probably why this has come out. But don't
Yeah,
quote me on that. I've not seen the series at all, so
yeah, I'm not super familiar with it. I know it was a manga originally, and then it was adapted into an anime. But yeah, I have heard it before. It does seem like it's getting more popular, and it is nice when some of these. It's nice to see games that are based on manga and anime that are not Naruto. It's nice to see them branching
yeah,
out into other franchises.
not Naruto and not Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, but you're right. After you mentioned, you're like, yeah, we've seen other fighting games like this for other animes before. I was like, yeah, you're right. Actually, I feel like we've gotten very similar games. I can't remember exactly. Like I know like Kill la Kill got a game a while back. I feel like that was
Oh yeah,
also kind of like a fighting
yeah.
game, right? Um, yeah, it does kind of seem like the trend. I don't know why they all gravitate towards this genre in particular. I guess it's just well suited to a lot of the over the top fight scenes. I guess that's probably what a lot of people want
Yeah,
to play.
and quite a lot of these are still ongoing as well. So I suppose they can't really adapt it into an adventure game like they did with Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, because the source material is still being adapted into anime, or it's still ongoing. It's not finished. So they just kind of bring these games out to tide people over, I suppose, until they actually do finish.
Right, right.
I mean, I'm surprised we've not had a third Attack on Titan game yet, actually, because that's had two, and I believe the anime finishes later on this year. So when that's all out, I suppose we might see another one of those, which I would be down with, because those were actually really, really fun games.
Yeah, they've re-released that second Attack on Titan game a couple times now. If I'm not like, I feel like if I remember correctly, the Attack on Titan 2 game was just kind of an expanded version of the first Attack on Titan game with some new content, and then they re-released that game again, Attack on Titan 2, like a different
Final
version.
Battle. Yeah. which
And
just had a bit of extra content to it, which I think only went up to the end of season 2, and we're now in what, the final season, part 3 or part 4? I've got no idea. The way they name that series is ridiculous. Just been going on and on. But
yeah. Okay, and the last game I want to talk about, this one I don't think a lot of people have heard of, so I wanted to put it on people's radar. This is, look, I don't want to make any bold claims here, but this is probably the closest thing to a new Kid Icarus game y'all are gonna get for a little while. Okay, so it is a game called Air Twister, and it's notable because the lead figure behind it was Yu Suzuki, who is known for being involved in just a lot of just really big games over the years. Yeah, so this is kind of this originally launched on Apple Arcade, of all places, as an exclusive. And it is basically they're calling it like an endless shooter, but I think that kind of minimizes it. It really is like a third-person rail shooter, basically. Like you're moving along a linear path, you're flying through these big soaring environments, and you're just kind of, as you're moving forward, you're kind of, swiping and like dodging around the screen to avoid bullets and stuff. Like, if you go and you watch the gameplay for this, it does share a lot of mechanical similarities to something like Kid Icarus Uprising, which is very exciting to me. Obviously, like, very different character, very different art style, very different story. But I've heard it's actually really good. I've heard it's a lot of fun, and it's got a really cool atmosphere to it, and some really good action. So I'm really happy to see that this is leaving the Apple Arcade ecosystem and going to be available on other platforms.
it reminds me a bit of Panzer Dragoon, actually, in terms of presentation and gameplay, which looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, it does. It does share some similarities to that. Yeah, I think it's got it's just a very striking game, and there's been a lot of just really interesting experimental stuff that's released on Apple Arcade over the years. Has kind of been stuck there, so it's nice to see some of it leaving that and coming to the Switch. I think the Switch is a good home for smaller games like this.
Yeah, a lot of stuff seems to make the jump quite gracefully to the platform, and it will be nice to see more of it.
Yeah. So this one is coming out November 10th, so a little bit further away, but I think this is definitely something that I'm interested in getting around to at some point. All right, let's talk about the games that have actually come out recently. Surprising amount of stuff. It's, sometimes the summer can be kind of dead, but that has not really been the case lately. I won't say anything super major, but definitely a couple standouts. The biggest release recently is The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. This is the newest Trails game to make the leap over to Western audiences. Now, I'm going to come at this with the caveat that I am not very well versed in this series. It is extremely long running. I know that this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but this is kind of the end of one of the story arcs that has been going on for a while in these games, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of the 10th. I think it's the 10th anyway. I mean, you've got the Sky trilogy, which is obviously 3, then you've got the Crossbell duo, which were just released on the Switch the last couple of years, and you've got 4 Cold Steel games, and then you've got this. So it's kind of not an ideal jumping on point. But I think it does kind of tie everything up.
Are you very familiar with these games? I get the sense that you're kind of a big JRPG person.
I am, but I'm not. I've only played the first Cold Steel game, and I kind of played that, and then I found out that I needed to play 5 games before it, so I've kind of stopped. It's like, I will get to Trails in the Sky when I get to Trails in the Sky, so I've only played the 1, unfortunately, for the moment, but it is on my to-do list, and I do have a copy. But I've no idea when I'm going to get to it, because they are massive time sinks. I mean, 30, 40 hours minimum, probably more than that if you actually want to do everything in them. So
Right. Times four
yeah,
times however many games are times 10. So you're 400 hours to experience the whole story probably at least. Um,
probably if you want to really, really get involved in it and dive into the lore and everything. Yeah,
yeah. Well, for what it's worth, this game seems like it's been landing pretty well with fans. I it's the other games that we've gotten this year, a couple of them have been kind of ports of older games in the series that have finally made it west for the first time. If I'm remembering correctly, at least one or two of them have been.
yeah. The
Um,
crossbow ones, they had fan localizations, and then I think it was NIS America that picked them up after ages and ages, and then we had one
right,
last year and we had one earlier this year as well. And we've
right.
got another one coming, I believe, in September, which is unconnected to these ones, so that will probably be a better jumping on point. But I think it's non-canon, so maybe not.
Yeah. Well, regardless, if you are a fan of this franchise, you're probably already playing this as we speak, but yeah, you're definitely eating good right now. There's a
Yeah,
lot to enjoy. Um, so yeah, that game is out now. That one came out earlier this week. Now another one that I think is notable just because this is an Ubisoft game that I don't think has gotten a lot of buzz. This game is called The Settlers: New Allies. And this is, I don't think a lot of people are familiar with this, but this is Ubisoft's kind of real time strategy franchise. And they don't make a lot of these games. Most of them are pretty old at this point. And this game in particular, I feel like even when it launched on PC, it wasn't really talked about very much. But as someone who does not play a lot of real-time strategy games, I'm really intrigued by this one. I'm really intrigued by kind of the quasi-historical, setting. I think like animation-wise, it looks really good, and these games just always feel good to play on the Switch. So I'm really curious about this one. I think this one could be a good time for me.
it looks quite interesting. I mean, as you say, there's quite a lot of these on PC, which is probably why I didn't make as big of a splash. I mean, when I think of these kinds of games on PC, I tend to think of Age of Empires or Civilization and things like that. But I
Sure.
think we've got a game on Switch, but we've not got an Age of Empires on Switch. But this does actually look quite interesting, and I do wonder how well it's made the jump to the platform as well in terms of how it controls.
Yeah, that is a good point because a lot of these games are kind of optimized for mouse and keyboard, so we'll see. But I know they also brought this one to Xbox and other platforms, so um, yeah. But I'd imagine with the Switch's touchscreen, it would probably be a good fit for that. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Well,
But
even if sorry,
no,
I
it's
was
all
going to say,
good.
even if it's not got touchscreen support, it might actually work better than you expect. I mean, a game I played, I can't remember now if it was, I think it probably was last year, was the Diofield Chronicle, which Square Enix brought out, which was kind of an RTS, but it controlled really well, and it felt like a traditional RTS, even though
Yeah.
it technically wasn't supposed to be. And I do actually wonder if they could emulate that kind of control scheme with this, because if they could, it would actually be a really good time to play, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. But yeah, this one just came out this week, so I'd say if you're on the fence, maybe look for some reviews and kind of see if it's for you. But yeah, I'm optimistic about this one. I'd like to check it out at some point. Um, all right, now this next one, I know some of these games are probably a little more niche and aren't going to appeal to everyone. It's not like the biggest week for game releases, but in some of these at least I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. So there's been a long-running franchise of arcade pinball games called Pinball FX, and they tend to release, I want to say they release a new one every generation, but they've been releasing new ones more frequently lately. They just released a new version of the game on the Switch called just Pinball FX. It is a free-to-play game, and the whole idea is you can go and you can buy different pinball tables to play, or you can buy them in packs or whatever. Um, and I know like pinball is probably not the most exciting thing in the world to a lot of people. I will say like the cool thing about games like this in the past have been like on the Switch, you can, if you're playing in handheld mode, you can rotate the Switch and you can play it vertically. I don't know if you can do that with this one. I think it'd be cool. Um, but regardless, I enjoy pinball, and these are like, they put in a lot of work. Like I think this is running on Unreal Engine now, and so like if you're really into pinball, you can go and you can get these classic tables that are recreated with all their original artwork and things like that, and realistic physics, and you can play in like different environments, like different kind of backdrops. So it's a cool idea, I think. And like as like something that's free to kind of try out, I could see the appeal in it.
I feel like it reminds me of the old pinball game they used to have on pretty much every Windows PC back in the 90s. I spent
Yes.
hours and hours on that as a kid. I used to love it. It was the only thing I could actually play properly because I could never figure out how to do Minesweeper. But
Yeah.
I actually wonder if the original table and sound effects from that pinball game might actually be in this one, because if it was, I would probably pick it up just for the nostalgia.
That would be surprising, but that would be quite the throwback. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't think this is like the most exciting game in the world for most people or whatever. But like, there's something to be said for these just kind of, you pick up and play. You're on a flight or something. You just want to like pick something up quickly and just enjoy something with some arcade nostalgia vibes. That's kind of where these games fit for me. And
For a free game, you could do a lot worse than this.
yes, yes, you could. Although, sometimes like I look at something like this and I'm like, I think I like might rather just buy it outright. Like I'd rather just buy a pack, like a base game that comes with like 10 really good pinball tables, charge me like $20 for it, and just enjoy that versus having to browse through a whole in-game store and um, you know, do it that
the
way.
the Star Wars pinball game they've got on the Switch has actually caught my eye a couple of times when it's gone on sale.
Yeah, this one does have, I mean, if like even if you're not like a huge pinball fan, they do have some tables based on like some pretty big properties and games. Like if you're like they have like a Borderlands table, they do have some Star Wars tables. I think they have like a Crypt of the Necrodancer table. Like they've got a pretty good range of stuff. Um, so so yeah, there's definitely some stuff in there for folks who play other video games as well. Um, but yeah, so Pinball FX, that one is out now. Yeah, free to start with a lot of DLC if that's your thing. Um, okay, this next one I wanted to highlight because we don't get a lot of sports games on the Switch, and a lot of times when we do get games, they're pretty compromised and generally not that impressive, unfortunately. Um, but I wrote a preview lately for Super Mega Baseball 4, and my takeaway really with that was we don't a lot of the sports games that we get nowadays, they've lost a lot of their charm that they had on older platforms. I feel like we've gotten so focused on doing these hyper realistic representations of sports that you lose a lot of the fun and the absurdity that came with some of the more arcade style games. And that's where this one comes in. So this game is AEW Fight Forever, and their whole pitch is like, they're not really trying to compete with the WWE games. They're taking a more of like an arcade focused approach. Just it is pretty grounded in like the actual AEW like brand if you're familiar with that. But there's a lot of just absurd different types of modes. They announced this week they're adding like a 30-player like battle royale like wrestling mode. And I'm just like, that's fantastic.
Right,
We need
that's going to be chaotic.
exactly. But you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like we need more sports games like that that kind of don't take themselves too seriously all the time, you know?
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I mean, I don't play sports games at all. It's not my genre, but I have to admit that that does make the idea of a just 30-player melee just makes me smile.
Yeah, yeah,
That's just a great
exactly.
idea.
Yeah, plus there's something about like even if you're not a big sports game fan, if you like fighting games, like I think that's also like something like this could appeal to you. Because I'm kind of like you, like I don't really play a ton of sports games, but I can enjoy a good fighting game, and even if this one is based on like a real property, that doesn't exactly turn me off from it. In fact, like knowing that they're taking these real, like real people and just like completely just putting them in absurd video game scenarios just makes me happy. So, um,
Yeah, why not?
yeah,
Just go wild with it. It's a game. Let's just have fun with it.
exactly. Um, so yeah, so that one is out now. If you're looking for a good kind of change of pace from the WWE games or something along those lines. Um, okay, this one I had to mention just because it's so bizarre. We're talking about sports games on Switch that don't take themselves too seriously, and this one I have so many questions, Don. Um, they made a whole game about professional cornhole. Are like
um,
are you familiar? You know cornhole, right? Like beanbag toss, basically.
no, I have never heard of cornhole. What's a cornhole?
Okay, maybe it's not a thing. It's kind of I mean, it's always kind of been like around in America, but like, okay, so it's just like a backyard game that like, you're having a party at your house. You go and you set up. It's like a beanbag toss, basically. So like you're standing on one side, your opponent's just standing on the other side, and you're just trying to toss beanbags into a little goal, and that's the entire thing. And somehow it has become a professional sport apparently in the US, and
Okay.
I don't know why or how, but yeah. So I should clarify, it's not like a big professional sport, but like they made a whole game on about throwing beanbags towards a little wooden goal with like professionally like licensed like professional players. I don't know what to make of this.
There's something new every day. I've never heard of this.
So that's just okay. That's interesting to me. Maybe it's like a regional thing. Like maybe I. So as far as you're aware, is this just not something that people play over in the UK?
Um, I honestly have no idea. They could do for all I know, but I've never heard of it before today. So, um,
Well, I'm glad I could teach you something new about American culture today, Don. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm reading the description of the game, and they're talking about how like you can buy different types of bean bags to change your strategy, and they have like 32 like different players in this game. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that cornhole of all things, the game that you play in your backyard when you have nothing better to do, is now getting its own video game.
you can make a game out of anything these days, it seems.
Yes, you can, and I am sure there's someone out there who is going to be like, yes, this is my jam. Give me a fully like voice acted cornhole game with realistic scans of all my favorite players. I just don't know who that person would be. I have never met such a type of person in my life, but they're probably out there.
It could be a good time with friends on a rainy day when you can't go outside and play actual cornhole, I guess.
There you go. There you go. You nailed it, Don. Um, so yeah, so that's out if you're interested. I'm not, but it's funny, so that's why I brought it up. Okay, and this next one, we've talked about cloud games on the Switch in the past, And so I don't want to get anyone's expectations too high. I know, the cloud gaming works better for some people than others, but so the latest cloud game to hit the Switch is The Medium, which I actually played back on my Xbox when it came out, and I thought it was a very, very interesting game. It's a horror game with the main kind of shtick being that you can control characters in two realities at once. Like the screen will actually split in half, and you'll be controlling your same character in kind of two different alternate dimensions at the same time. Um, and it really is a like super interesting game mechanically for that reason. I liked the tone of it a lot. It kind of takes place in this old, decrepit hotel that's kind of been overrun by plants and nature. And it's a really good game. And so I was excited when I saw it was coming to the Switch, but then I saw it was a cloud version, and I lost a lot of my interest, unfortunately, at that point.
Yep. That seems to be the way whenever they say cloud version, it just goes. Interest is gone.
Yeah, but I will say
It's,
this: if you don't have another way to play this game and it looks interesting to you, I mean, you might want to consider it because this is actually a game that I don't think they could get running on Switch. Like, it is very technically demanding. It even had issues running on Xbox just because it's trying to render two game worlds at the same time. Um, so this might actually be like a good accessible option for people, but yeah, I wish it was a native port instead because that would have made it even more impressive.
yeah, I mean, I suppose you can't expect too much since it is a current generation game, and the
Right,
Switch kind of
right. I
struggles to
know, I
last
know.
games sometimes. So
I can dream. Okay, that's fine.
I suppose it's better
Um,
than nothing.
yes, it is perhaps marginally better than nothing. That I will agree with.
Marginally,
Yeah,
we'll give it that much.
yeah. I do just wonder like what is like how long are these cloud games really gonna stay accessible? Because that's really the question. Like, with these games more than anything, like there's always been conversation how with digital games, oh, you don't really own your games, you're just kind of buying a license to them. But for the most part, I mean, games do get delisted sometimes, but it's a pretty rare occasion. But all these cloud games, eventually, someday down the road, the, Switch is going to be replaced by next gen console, and, at some point these servers for these cloud games are going to shut down. I would imagine. And, you're spending basically full price on these games. I mean, this is a $50 for a cloud access to this cloud game, and there's just really no guarantee how long it'll be accessible. So I think that's the thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way about this current system. But yeah, but
Yeah,
at the same time, I
it's
don't
got to
really
go.
know what the solution is.
It's got to go eventually, hasn't it? I mean, I would expect these to be available on whatever the Switch's successor is, because I imagine purchase is probably tied to the Nintendo account, and they've already said they're going to keep the Nintendo account system. But
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true. There's hope.
years and years and years down the line, you're just going to lose these things because of licensing, or because they just don't want to support the servers anymore, or whatever
Right,
other reason they want to cook up. You'll just lose that purchase entirely, which
right.
sucks, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. So buy at your own risk, I guess. But if you're really looking for a way to play this game, it's probably not a bad option as long as you don't mind all the caveats that come with cloud games. But yeah, so that's pretty much all the notable releases that have come out recently. But before we wrap things up, we're gonna end with our classic segment, Refresh Rate, where we talk about the games that we've been playing lately. And Don, since this is your first time on the show, why don't you start us off? What have you been enjoying lately?
Okay, well, my main game for this week, and I am a little bit behind the times. I mean, I left it for 6 weeks before I decided to start it, has been Tears of the Kingdom, which I was kind of dreading picking up, to be honest, because my Breath of the Wild experience was not positive, let's put it that way. But I have actually really enjoyed the time I've put into this, and that's been a huge surprise to me. And it's been a really good time. That's been my main focus for the better part of this week. I've put about 40 hours into it, and I've not even touched the story yet. So It must be doing
Yeah,
something right.
that's a pretty common sentiment from a lot of folks who I've heard who have played the game. Yeah, and it's interesting too. I feel like, we've internally at Nintendo Everything, we've all been talking about this game obviously, and it's nice to know that there were a couple of us who are over on the site who had at least like some things about Breath of the Wild that we weren't a super huge fan of, and for some of us, Tears of the Kingdom kind of remedied some of that, and for some of us, it didn't. And so it's been really interesting hearing everyone's opinions about the game. I'm like for me personally, like it's not the type of game that I'm wanting to play right now. Like I can acknowledge that it's a good game, but like generally speaking, I prefer tighter, more I don't want to say more linear, but I guess there is some truth to that. I enjoy open world games, but when it comes to, I do like having, a clear path to be set on,
Yeah,
and for me this game is just a little too big. Like it's I know that sounds crazy, but it can be genuinely overwhelming to play at times when you're
yeah,
trying to progress and you get pulled off in a different direction, and it's just not compatible with my brain in that way, I feel like.
yeah.
But
It's like a lack of structure, isn't it? You can just there's just so much game. It's like, well, what do I engage with? What happens if I miss this? Is this timed? You can just go by things without even seeing them, which is it's rewarding when you find it, but when you miss it and then you find out about it later, it's actually really irritating. It's like, well, I just missed out on a major part of that game, and it's like I don't really want to go back and do it because I just put like 50, 60 hours into this. I don't want to put another 50, 60 hours into doing it again. And yeah, open world games can be really hit or miss, and I think you've probably got to be in the right state of mind for them.
right. But you
Otherwise,
said
they're
you've been
just
enjoying Tears a lot more than Breath of the Wild. So what's
yeah.
changed for you?
Um, I think in part I've changed because I hadn't really played that many open world games when Breath of the Wild came out, and when it did come out, I just wasn't keen on how it did away with absolutely everything I loved about Zelda and didn't really add anything in to replace it that I personally found worthwhile. I mean, I didn't like weapon durability. I didn't really care for the abilities that you were given or how you were just left to your own devices because I've always loved getting new things at the end of a dungeon and then going back into the world and just like, well, what can I do with this? What secrets have I
Right.
missed? I like the backtracking aspect. And of course, Breath of the Wild didn't have that. And weapon durability drove me mad. And
Right. Right.
I didn't like trying to climb in the rain either. I mean, I could go on and on about the various flaws I have with Breath of the Wild, but Tears of the Kingdom seems to fix quite a bit of it. I mean, I don't have the issue with durability that I used to because of the weapon fusion, and enemy encounters seem to be more worthwhile because of the monster parts, which you can obviously fuse to your weapons, and there seems to be a lot more to engage with and a lot more to do. I suppose the world just feels like it's got more in it, which I'm more interested in doing, which is partly down to me, but I also think it's partly down to how they've changed it between the games, because I know one of the major pulls for Breath of the Wild for a lot of people was the emptiness of the world and the desolation, because of course you were waking up after Ganon had basically wrecked it. So I could see the appeal to that, but it wasn't my kind of thing personally. I like engaging in a world, but there wasn't really much to engage with, I felt. But it's kind of changed with this one. So it's been
Yeah.
more my thing, I think.
Yeah, I do really like, I will say, with Tears of the Kingdom, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, they really have made the world feel a lot more like a real place with more going on, more characters to interact with, I think more compelling side quests when you're able to find them. The game still does really just kind of leave you to your own devices, but I do think just over the course of exploring, you will just encounter more things that are
Yeah,
interesting than you will in Breath of the Wild. So that element of it, I really like, and I do think I should probably spend some more time with it. Now that I've kind of had a little bit of distance from, I think, all the hype surrounding the game. I think I might be able to enjoy it
Yeah,
a little bit
that's
more.
one of the reasons that I play it for quite a long time, because of the hype and the expectations, and it was nothing but glowing positivity. And I was just like, well, I want to wait and get some more grounded opinions before I dive into this myself, in case I get my expectations up and then my expectations are let down, because I feel like if that happens, it's on me rather than on the game, and I don't get a clear view of it, which kind of sucks, to be honest. Because of course, when everyone's enjoying something, I want to know what the fuss is about, and I want to get into it as well. But
Sure.
for whatever reason, I can't do that because it's not really my kind of game. It does kind of suck.
How do you feel about the shrines returning this time around?
um, I think I've done about 80 of the shrines now. I mean, I've been going over
Oh
the map and
wow.
doing all of them the same way I did in Breath of the Wild. I just made a beeline for every shrine. And with Tears, it's taken me a bit longer because there's been more to pull my attention away. But I honestly feel like the shrines have been a little bit better designed this time around in terms of the puzzles, because they're not so hyper fixated on using one particular ability that Link's got. It's just like you can approach it in loads of different ways, which I suppose in one way is a bad thing because it makes the puzzles more generic. But in the other in other ways, I think it's a good thing because it just means that you can come up with more creative solutions to approach them. I mean, I've bypassed a few puzzles entirely, which I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to do. But that kind of
Yeah.
suits me down to the ground, to be honest, because I'm not a huge fan of puzzles. So
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that kind of is the selling point of this game is, it really is a sandbox. If you can think of a way to do it, you can probably execute it in this game. And it's certainly it can be very rewarding to find a solution to a puzzle that you didn't think would work or is a bit non-traditional and then pull it off and you're like, oh, that actually did work and that's really cool. I think for me, I'm like, and I know I've talked about it in the past, like I do agree with you that overall the shrines are, I think, better designed and more compelling this time around, partially because of their open-endedness and just the way the new tools, Ultra Hand and Fuse and all that, allow you to be more creative than they did the first time around. But at the same time, I still, they still get repetitive for me pretty quickly, all these shrines, and I do eventually kind of reach a point where I feel like I'm just kind of doing the same thing over and over again, and it's I mean, they are different puzzles, but they do kind of tend to fall into similar categories, and I feel like I've done a couple of them. I've so I think that's really the thing, just like, for all the talk there is about like how, oh, we don't like, these checklists and open world games and going and, clearing off map markers and stuff. I guess when a lot of people are talking about Tears of the Kingdom, they talk about it in the sense where it's like, oh, well, this game is different. Like, there's not a lot of just like random activities to check off on your map, and there's not a lot of repetitive tasks to do. But I don't really think that's true. Like, I do feel like if you are fatigued by those elements of open world game design, I don't really think Tears of the Kingdom is going to change your mind in that way.
It definitely isn't. I mean, this is where I think I've changed in terms of what I can tolerate and what I'm interested in, because I can fundamentally recognize that they are pretty much identical games. I mean, they even share the same base map, I think, for Hyrule, but I've had more tolerance for the checklists than I had in Breath of the Wild, which makes me wonder, if I went back to Breath of the Wild now, would I enjoy it more than what I did the first time I played it? Because the design, I suppose, is pretty much identical, even if the way it goes about it is different. So I don't think it's a better or a worse game. I think it's just a different game in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The same crit could level at Breath of the Wild, you could also level at Tears of the Kingdom, because it does the same things in terms of the checklist, in terms of recycling the shrine puzzles, like you said. It is the same kind of gameplay, it's just done in a different way. So yeah, if you didn't like it the first time, really, the second game probably won't sell you on it, just because it does repeat the same mistakes, but it just does it differently.
Yeah, it really depends what you're looking for. I mean, again, I will say, like, I'm enjoying it more than I did with Breath of the Wild. Just still, for me, it's just not really what I hope that the franchise continues to branch out in other directions other than just this, because I just think Zelda has so much more to offer than this, this particular type of game structure.
Yeah.
And I'm like you. I hold a lot of nostalgia for older games in the franchise, and maybe it is just nostalgia. Maybe I should go back and revisit some of those and see if they still hold up as well as I feel like they do. But I think there's something to be said for just having a really just tightly crafted progression path with, a good story, and characters that are distinct and are more present in your adventure than a lot of the characters are in this game. I think those are some of the things that attract me to these games a lot.
Yes, to be honest, I would love that as well, because I definitely do prefer these. I mean, the fun I've been having with Tears of the Kingdom has been fun, but it's not what I would associate with Zelda, and it's not the way that I think of Zelda, and I would love another experience like that, like, I suppose, A Link Between Worlds, or the Oracle games, and the older ones. I think there's room for both. I mean, I know they've said that they don't know where they're going to go after Tears of the Kingdom. They don't think they can go back, but I would still love a traditional sort of Zelda experience in the future, because I think there's a room for it in the industry.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, there's not much like those older Zelda games nowadays, I feel like. And so I feel like more than ever they're really valuable to have accessible, even if we don't get new ones. It would be nice to see the remaining older classics that we don't have available on Switch. It'd be nice to see those at least brought over, so that people like me who are just just miss those games in particular can just go back and replay them in a convenient way.
Where on earth are Wind Waker and Twilight Princess?
I know.
We've been saying that for years. Where are they?
There's every time there's a direct, there's so much hope, and we've yet to get them, but it's not too late.
On the rocks every time.
It's not too late. Yeah, someday.
Yeah.
Oh, well, very cool. Well, for my part, I have been busy playing the latest DLC for Mario plus Rabbids, Sparks of Hope. That game was, I mean, I played it last year when it came out, and I thought it was excellent. I'm a really big Mario guy, and I was initially skeptical about the Mario plus Rabbids, the whole franchise concept, but the first game really won me over, and the second game I just think is better in basically every way. It's just a huge... honestly, I think it's innovative just for the whole genre in terms of how a turn-based strategy game can play and still be turn-based, but not feel like it's turn-based. It's such a... Did you play Sparks of Hope?
I did. I did quite a few guides for it actually on the site, and yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. I mean, I wasn't overly fond of the first one. I was turned off by the whole idea because I cannot stand the rabbits. I have never liked the rabbits at all, but the gameplay is really, really good. It's exactly what you'd expect of a Mario game, really. It's really high quality, and yeah, I feel the same way as you do. The second one improved on the first in pretty much every way.
Yeah. And so they are releasing DLC for this game. We got a small piece of DLC earlier this year called the Tower of Doom, which is, it's kind of like a run-based mode where you're just going through progressively more difficult battles, and you kind of pick which one you want to do next based on the rewards and stuff. It was fine, not something super substantial that is going to hold a lot of people's interest, I don't think. But the DLC we got recently is basically a whole story expansion. It's called The Last Spark Hunter, and it introduces a whole new planet to the game called Melodic Gardens. It introduces some new enemy types that I found really engaging, actually, to fight. There's one in particular where after you defeat it, you have to dash through it, or it will respawn with full health on the next turn. So that really introduces a huge layer of strategy because you actually have to, normally when you're playing the game, I think for a lot of players, you will kind of like dash into an enemy and then attack because once you attack, you're kind of frozen in place. So now it completely changes up the flow of battles because you have to figure out basically a way to reverse your strategy and how you've been defeating enemies the entire game. So I found that really engaging. The
That's
new
like a
pl-
direct. Sorry, I was just say that
yeah,
sounds like a direct answer to the common strategy of using Mario and Luigi to just snipe enemies from a distance. Because I
yeah,
never use that. I hardly ever use the dash attack in that game. I just hang back and keep people out of the way and just let them come to me. That sounds like a direct answer to that. That sounds really good actually, because that would completely shake up the game, like you said, because you're going to have to adapt a completely different strategy for it. That sounds pretty good.
yeah. And the other element of that is there's also a new type of foe that it has an attack where it will cover the map in the kind of if you haven't played the game, there's a substance called dark mess. It's like a play on the word darkness. It's but it will spray it across the map, and if you touch it, your characters will take damage. And a lot of times, it will land right where you need to go to like do a dash attack or whatever. So that also adds another element of okay, well you need to get up close with your enemies this time, but you also have to kind of work around these new obstacles on the map. So yeah, combat is the new battles they added this time around. I thought were really engaging, and the new planet is also kind of cool too. They didn't talk about it too much before release, but the new kind of mechanic in the overworld is you have a little boat that you can sail around on, and a lot of the puzzles that you would kind of encounter are kind of scattered around across these islands now that you sail between. It's nothing crazy, like you're not going like a super far distance or anything. It's all pretty condensed, but I thought it was an interesting way to kind of shake up the traversal of that game.
I might have to give that a look actually, because I haven't touched Mario and Rabbids since I played it, but now that both sets of DLC are out, I might actually try and find some kind of way to make the time to give it a look in, because that does actually sound pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, there's one more set of DLC coming for the game too. That's the big Rayman themed expansion, where you'll actually get to control Rayman, which is crazy to think about that they're putting that in a Mario game of all things. So I think that's the one that a lot of people are excited for. But I think like if you're like kind of weighing whether or not you want to pick up the season pass and if it's worth it, I think the DLC is really good, and I think it's worth its asking price, and I think it makes a good case for picking up the season pass if you've been on the fence about it.
I picked up the launch edition with the season pass because I was planning on just playing all of it.
Well, there you
So
go. You have no excuse now.
no, I have no excuse. I need to go back and play the DLC because a lot of the time with these games, I buy the DLC and I never go back and do it because I just don't have the time.
Yeah, yeah,
But
I hear you.
it sounds like this one might be worth making the time for.
Yeah, I think it is. Um, and one other game I want to mention kind of quickly, just because I thought it was really interesting. This game is not on the Switch, but it's a really cool sci-fi game. It's called XO1, and I don't think a lot of folks have heard of it, but you might have seen footage of it trending on Twitter at one point. So this game is it's kind of, I don't want to call it like a plow. It's an exploration focused game. You're controlling this spacecraft that basically it transforms from this like really like heavy like orb style spacecraft into basically what looks like a flying disc, and you switch between these two modes to like build momentum and launch yourself across these alien planets. So there's like a story attached. There's a reason why you're doing all this, but it feels. I want to mention this because it feels so good to play. It's crazy. So like if you watch a trailer for this game, you'll launch yourself in the air as this like disc form, and you'll kind of glide across the world a little bit until you need to pick up more momentum and speed, and then you shift into this like orb form, and you're like trying to like basically like launch yourself off the terrain like it's a ramp, and then you fly further across the world. And it's all like, if you play it on like an Xbox or a next gen console, like visually it's all like very impressive. The world, I think, has some level of procedural generation to it, but it's a really just striking game to play and look at. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, and you want just kind of like a moody sci-fi adventure with some really interesting traversal, I think it's worth looking at. Are you familiar with this game at all, Don?
No, I can't say I've ever heard of it before, but there's quite a lot of PC games I've never heard of. I mean, just looking at the Steam page where it's actually half off, I mean, I do recognize some of the Future Friends games. I mean, I've heard of Omno before. I think that came out for Switch fairly recently. So I have heard of the devs, but I'd never heard of the game before. But yeah, I think I can get what you're saying about traversal, because that can be quite a fun thing if you're given a good way to do it. I mean, the way you describe it, it kind of reminds me of the Pathless a little bit, which came out. I mean, you build up speed in that by shooting targets, if I remember correctly, which was really satisfying because it becomes like a game in itself to try and keep up your speed, doesn't it?
Right,
It's just
exactly.
keep going and not to slow down, just keep going and just see how you can go. And yeah, it sounds pretty intriguing.
Yeah, I'd say if you're looking for something a little bit more experimental, it's a really quick. I mean, you can get through this whole thing in a couple hours, so it's a nice little diversion between bigger games. But yeah, well, with that, that is our show for the week. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and listening to Nintendo Everything Refresh. And I wanted to give everyone a heads up that we might be going on a brief hiatus the next couple weeks. I will be going on my honeymoon, and so we may not have anyone to host the show. So we may be, it might be a couple weeks until you hear from us, but we will be back soon, one way or another, and we will be sure to catch everyone up on all of the news that has happened in the meantime. But yeah, Don, thank you for coming on the show. It was really great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I hope I haven't been tedious.
No. We love having new people on the show all the time. It's awesome, and you did great. So yeah, hopefully you'll come back again soon. It's one of the things I love about having different folks on every week is we get to hear different opinions on big games like Tears of the Kingdom, and it's always really cool to hear what different people think of stuff like that. So, but yeah, if you like the show, please go and spread the word. We are on pretty much every podcast platform that you might want to look for us on. We also have a video version over on YouTube and Spotify if you prefer to have some video game footage playing in the background while you listen. And if you like the show, please give us a rating on one of the platforms. That really helps the algorithm get our show out to more people, which is always a good thing. And yeah, if you have any feedback, please leave us a comment. We also have our email in the show notes over on YouTube and Spotify. So if you have any suggestions for the show, future topics, or just general feedback, we are always happy to hear it. But yeah, thank you to all of our listeners who have been tuning in week after week. And we'll be back at you soon with everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo. See you guys next time.